Everyone in town thought I was gone. Some whispered it like gossip over coffee. Others spoke it like fact, shaking their heads as they passed my cabin, convinced the man who welded fences and kept to himself had finally faded into the mountains, for good. But none of them knew the truth. I wasn't dead. I was watching, and what I saw from my kitchen window would set in motion the most satisfying revenge I've ever pulled off in my life. Amanda Sterling was her name, HOA president, realtor, and full-time predator dressed in tailored blazers, and heels sharp enough to draw blood. She'd been circling my property for months, slowing her car to a crawl as she passed, craning her neck to take in every inch of my grandfather's mountain cabin. I could almost see the dollar signs spinning in her eyes. To her, this wasn't a home. It was prime development land. 12 acres of untouched mountain views. My peace, my history. Her payday. I was 52, a retired welder, living alone in the place my grandfather built with his own hands. I'd spent the last decade surrounded by nothing but pine trees, the scent of iron from my little workshop, and the kind of silence you can't find in town. But lately, that silence had been broken by overdue notices piling up in my mailbox. I was $5,000 behind on payments, and each letter felt like a countdown clock ticking toward losing the only place that ever felt like mine. That's when I overheard Mrs. Henderson, my neighbor down the road, talking on the phone. I'd been mending my fence near the property line when her voice floated over. "Haven't seen Tommy in weeks," she said. "Mail's overflowing. Newspapers on the porch. He's probably dead up there." Dead. Just like that. A normal man might have called out, waved, said, "Hey, I'm fine, just laying low." But something inside me twisted. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was spite. But in that moment, I decided to let them believe it. What would Amanda do if she thought the cabin was abandoned? If she thought I was gone for good? It was a dangerous game, but I wanted to see the mask slip. So I vanished. I stopped collecting the mail. Let the papers pile higher. Parked my truck behind the cabin. Closed the curtains and stayed in the shadows. If I was going to play dead, I was going to play it right. 3 days later, Amanda made her move. She drove past 5 times. In one afternoon, slowing to take photos, scribbling notes on a little pad. On the 4th day, she didn't even bother with subtlety. She pulled over, stepped out of her car, and walked straight to my mailbox like she owned the place. From behind my curtains, I watched her flip through my mail, a federal crime for anyone counting, and then stop. Her eyes widened. She'd found something. The county notices about my overdue payments. Amanda's lips curled into a smile that didn't belong on any human face. She pulled out her phone and dialed. I couldn't hear her words, but her body language told me everything. The way she bounced on her heels like she'd just hit the jackpot. The next morning, she came back. This time with a man in a cheap suit carrying a clipboard. They strolled around my property, pointing at walls, measuring like they were planning renovations. I watched them from the basement window, my phone recording every second. Rick Mason. That's what I later learned his name was. Seemed uneasy. "Are we sure the owner's gone?" he asked. Amanda waved him off like an annoying fly. "Trust me, this is a great opportunity. Nobody else knows about it yet. She had my keys. My keys, the fake rock by the back door, the one my grandfather had hidden decades ago for emergencies, was gone, and they used it to waltz inside my cabin. For 2 hours they moved from room to room, Amanda's voice drifting through the floorboards. "The natural light in here is amazing. This could be a gorgeous modern kitchen. And the workshop? Oh, that could be converted into a luxury entertainment space." I gripped the railing so hard my knuckles turned white. That workshop wasn't just a room. It was where my grandfather taught me to weld, where I'd burned my first fingertips on hot steel, where I'd learned that honest work meant more than money. And she was talking about gutting it like it was nothing. Every step she took was a trespass. Every word she spoke was a lie. But I didn't storm upstairs. Not yet. Because the thing about Amanda was, the deeper she thought she was winning, the harder the fall would be. And I was already building the trap she wouldn't see coming. Amanda didn't waste any time. By the end of that week, half the neighborhood believed she was the grieving, responsible neighbor handling my estate. I listened from my basement hideout as she made call after call, weaving her story with the precision of a spider spinning a web. The owner is no longer in the picture, she told other agents. The family wants it sold quickly. She never said the word dead outright. No, she was too smart for that. But every phrase carried the weight of a funeral. Rick, to his credit, kept asking questions she didn't want to answer. What if the family shows up? What about legal paperwork? Stop overthinking, she told him. You're looking at a property worth at least $300,000. The commission alone could set us up for months. Greed was her oxygen, and she was breathing deep. A few days later, Amanda returned with reinforcements. 3 realtors from other agencies. They arrived in polished blazers, heels clicking against my porch like they owned the boards. Amanda played hostess, clipboard in hand, greeting them as though she'd been entrusted with a sacred duty. The owner passed away recently, she announced, eyes shining with false sincerity. The family asked me to manage the sale. I nearly laughed out loud. The family was a microwave meal in my freezer and a toolbox with my name on it. From my basement window, I watched them file inside. They admired the hardwood floors my grandfather had installed in 1962. They marveled at the authentic mountain architecture, which was just what happens when you build to survive a winter in these hills. And when they stepped into my workshop, Amanda smiled like a wolf in a lamb pen. This space has so much potential, she said. Imagine converting it into a sleek home office or a cozy lounge. Cozy lounge. The same walls that had echoed with the sound of my grandfather's hammer were now nothing but potential to her. Still, I stayed quiet. Because I could see the cracks forming. One woman in the group, sharp eyes, maybe mid-40s, started asking questions Amanda clearly hadn't prepared for. Property lines, zoning restrictions, mineral rights. This wasn't someone looking to flip a house. This was someone thinking long-term development, the kind of big money Amanda could smell from a mile away. By the time the realtors left, they were already calling clients. Amanda's exclusive secret was now spreading like wildfire, exactly what she wanted. But she didn't realize the most important person in the loop was me. That night, she and Rick lingered on my porch. I could hear their voices clearly through the floorboards. I'm still not sure about this, Rick said. We don't have proof the owner's even— Rick, Amanda cut him off sharply. This is the kind of opportunity you don't question. You take it and run. She didn't know it yet, but she was running straight into a trap. I called an old friend that night, a retired police detective. Kept it hypothetical, of course. If someone tried to sell a property they didn't own, what would you need to prove it was fraud? His answer sharpened my plan. Paper trails, recordings, witnesses. I already had all 3, and I was about to collect more. The next afternoon, Amanda's game escalated again. This time she invited not just realtors, but actual buyers. 8 people arrived at my cabin, Amanda in her best dress, Rick looking like he wanted to. Be anywhere else? 3 other realtors circling for commission, and 3 buyers clutching checkbooks. From below, I listened as Amanda sold my life piece by piece. Original cabinets, authentic farmhouse charm, she said in the kitchen. Cozy, bedrooms with endless customization potential, she cooed upstairs. When they entered the workshop, she didn't hesitate. This could be a modern entertainment space, a wine cellar, or a high-end art studio. Her voice was sugar. Her intentions were poison. That's when I started my little sideshow. I'd rigged the cabin with hidden speakers and motion-triggered lights the night before. Just subtle enough to make the place feel restless. Lights flickered as Amanda boasted about original electrical character. A soft thud echoed from the upstairs hall while she pitched cozy mountain living. One buyer, a businessman from the city, grinned. Haunted property? Could add value? Another woman claimed she could feel the spiritual energy of the place. Amanda didn't miss a beat. That's just the unique mountain atmosphere, she said smoothly, as if she'd planned it. And then the bidding started. 250,000, 275, 290. I sat in my basement, listening to strangers throw money at a woman who had no right to a single dollar, but Amanda, she wanted more. She told them she'd need to review all offers and hinted at other interested parties. Classic bait to drive the price higher. Rick looked pale. I could hear him whispering, "What about the groceries in the fridge? The warm coffee pot?" Amanda had an answer for everything. "Caretaker comes by. A state lawyer was here this morning." Lies layered so thick you could drown in them. By the time the tour ended, Amanda had 3 serious offers and follow-up. Meetings lined up. She thought she was untouchable. But I knew tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow I wouldn't be in the basement. I'd be upstairs, standing in my own living room. And Amanda Sterling was about to meet the man she'd declared dead. The morning of the final showing, Amanda was already on my porch before the sun had burned off the mountain mist. I could hear her on the phone, voice low and confident, confirming details with buyers. "Yes, this will be the last look before we make our final decisions," she purred. She had no idea the decision wouldn't be hers to make. From my basement, I could picture her, hair perfect, suit crisp, that fake realtor smile ready to charm away any doubt. She even brought a briefcase, this time full of contracts she had no legal right to sign. The woman didn't just plan her scams, she dressed them up in authority. I'd spent days planning my entrance. No more hiding in the shadows, no more letting her drip poison into the ears of strangers. If Amanda wanted to sell the ghost of Tommy, Callahan, then today she was going to meet him, face to face. I hadn't shaved in days. My clothes were wrinkled, stained with the dust and grit of the basement workshop. I made sure I looked like a man who'd just crawled out from 6 feet under, disheveled enough to make people question reality. I waited, listening as her voice floated down through the floorboards. "This bathroom has original fixtures and plenty of potential for modernization," she said, her tone syrupy sweet. The buyers chuckled, murmuring their interest. That's when I turned the doorknob. The air in the hallway went still as I stepped out, blinking in the light like a man disturbed from his morning coffee. I didn't say a word at first. I just stood there, letting them take me in, the living, breathing man who wasn't supposed to exist. The reaction was better than I'd imagined. 2 buyers screamed so loudly it echoed through the rafters. A woman clutched her husband's arm and shouted "Ghost" before promptly fainting. Rick dropped every paper he was holding, scattering contracts across the floor, his breath coming in sharp, panicked bursts. And Amanda turned the color of unbaked bread. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. It was as if her brain had hit a wall it couldn't climb over. I let the silence work for me, the way a welder lets the heat settle before striking again. Then, in the calmest voice I could muster, I said, "Sorry, folks. House showing is canceled. The owner is very much alive." The words hung in the air like smoke. Confusion rippled through the crowd, then anger. You could see the gears turning in their heads as they tried to reconcile the reality in front of them with Amanda's fabricated world. Amanda found her voice, sharp and shrill. "This man is trespassing," she barked, pointing at me as if I were the intruder in my own living room. "Call the sheriff. He has no right to be here." The audacity almost made me laugh. Instead, I walked past her, slow and steady, to the kitchen table where I laid out my cards. My driver's license, with my name and this exact address, the deed to the property, a utility bill from last month, proof stacked like iron plates. Thomas Callahan, I said, tapping my license. Resident of this cabin for 15 years. Still breathing. And very curious about why there are strangers planning renovations in my home. The businessman, who'd been scribbling notes earlier, stared at Amanda. His voice was low, but the weight of it filled the room. You told us the owner was dead, he said. You showed us documents. You took our offers. Amanda's mask cracked. She stammered, reaching for any story that might save her. He abandoned the property. I was helping. He's unstable. Dangerous! But no one was buying it. Not with the truth standing right in front of them. Rick's loyalty evaporated like morning fog. I told you we needed proof, he said, turning to her with panic in his eyes. I told you. This was risky! His voice was high and desperate, like he was trying to carve himself out of the sinking ship. Amanda's voice rose, pitching between rage and fear, but the buyers weren't listening anymore. They were whispering to each other, their faces shifting, from confusion to the cold realization that they'd been played. The room felt electric, the kind of tension you can almost taste. I could have ended it there. I could have told them all to leave and called the sheriff. But I had something better in mind. Because in my basement, behind a locked door, was a month's worth of evidence. Every illegal entry, every lie, every bid she'd taken on property she didn't own. And before this day was done, everyone in that room, and a few extra guests, were going to watch Amanda Sterling's perfect little empire collapse in real time. I just needed to make sure. None of them left before the show started. While Amanda was sputtering and the buyers were murmuring in low, angry voices, I slipped away for just a moment. Not out the front door, out the side, through the basement workshop. The old iron gate at the end of my driveway was still wide open, the one she and her guests had driven through without a thought. I took my welder from the workbench, the same one my grandfather had taught me to use when I was 12, and in less. Then 3 minutes, the hinges and latch were fused shut, in a way no one without heavy tools was getting through. It was clean, professional, permanent, at least until I decided otherwise. When I walked back in through the basement door, Amanda was still at full volume. You don't have to listen to this man. He's just trying to ruin a legitimate sale. But something had shifted. The buyers were looking at her like she was a spider they'd just realized was poisonous. Rick was pale and sweating. And when, I said, nobody's leaving until we clear a few things up. The room fell silent. That's when the first person tried the gate. The sharp clank of metal followed by an angry voice. It's welded shut. The word spread like wildfire. Suddenly, everyone was testing the front door, the back deck, pacing like caged animals. Amanda rounded on me, her voice screeching. You can't hold us here. This is kidnapping. I leaned against the doorframe, calm as a man watching rain hit the tin roof. No, Amanda. This is making sure the sheriff hears everyone's side of the story before anyone disappears. That's when I brought out the laptop. Weeks of preparation had led to this moment. Every time she'd stepped foot on my property, every time she'd lied to a buyer, every time she'd opened my mailbox, I'd been recording. I clicked the first file. On the screen, Amanda appeared, bold as brass, rifling through my mail on the 4th day of her little surveillance tour. Someone in the room gasped. The next clip showed her and Rick walking the property, pointing at walls and measuring. Amanda, narrating her vision for the perfect modern kitchen, while stepping over my welcome mat. Then came audio. Amanda's voice telling other agents, the owner is no longer in the picture. Her tone soft and conspiratorial. The businessman shook his head, muttering, she sold us a lie. Amanda's face had gone from white to blotchy red, her eyes darting like a cornered fox. That's taken out of context," she said weakly. I didn't stop. I played the tour with the 3 visiting realtors, Amanda smiling in my workshop, calling it a blank canvas for something spectacular. The buyers watching themselves bid against each other on a property they now knew wasn't for sale. That was the moment the anger turned sharp. "You took my deposit," one shouted. "You lied to all of us," another said, voice trembling. With fury, Rick finally broke. "I told her this wasn't right," he said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "She convinced me it was abandoned, that the owner was gone. I didn't know—" But his eyes told me he knew enough to feel the walls closing in. Amanda snapped at him. "Shut up, Rick!" But it was too late. He'd stepped away from her, physically and morally. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, pausing the footage, "welcome to the Amanda Sterling crime documentary, produced and directed by the man she tried to bury before he was dead." I let the silence stretch. Outside the gate, neighbors had started gathering. Word travels fast in a small town. Cars idled along the shoulder, people leaning on hoods, trying to catch a glimpse of the drama they'd heard about in hushed phone calls. Amanda realized for the first time that this wasn't just a private embarrassment. This was public and growing. When the sound of tires on gravel announced the sheriff's arrival, Amanda bolted for the door like she might somehow talk her way out before he saw the evidence. But she hit the gate, hard, and turned to see half the county watching. Her like a soap opera villain caught mid-plot. Sheriff Davis stepped out of his cruiser, slow and deliberate. "Morning, Tommy," he said, giving me a nod. "Heard you've had some unexpected company." "Oh, you could say that," I replied, gesturing toward the laptop. "You might want to take a look at this." Amanda started talking over me, throwing accusations into the air like confetti. "He's dangerous! He locked us in! "Ma'am," Davis said, cutting her off with the tone of a man who's been dealing with liars for 20 years. "I'm going to need you to slow down and start explaining why you've been accepting offers on a house that isn't yours." The way she froze told me she'd just realized there was no good answer, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the tension in my chest loosen. The trap had sprung. She was caught. But the real satisfaction? That was still to come. Sheriff Davis didn't rush. He took in the scene like a man surveying a crime already solved. The locked gate, the buyers glaring daggers at Amanda, Rick looking like he wanted to melt into the floor, and me standing there with a month's worth of proof in my hands. "Let's see it," he said, nodding toward the laptop. I clicked play. The room filled with Amanda's own voice, smooth and confident as she told prospective buyers, "The owner passed away recently. The family asked me to handle the sale." Davis didn't interrupt. He just watched, arms folded, his jaw tightening. A fraction with each new clip. Amanda rifling through my mail, unlocking my back door with my hidden key, walking strangers through my living room as if she'd paid for every board herself. When the bidding war footage played, the businessman stepped forward. "That's me offering $290,000. Cash." She told me it was a once-in-a-lifetime deal. His voice shook with fury. Amanda tried to talk over him, waving her hands like she could swat away the truth. "They misunderstood. I was protecting the property from—" "Ma'am," Davis said, his voice carrying enough weight to still the air. "The only person threatening this property is the one selling it without the owner's permission. Rick." Finally cracked. "She made it all up," he blurted, his voice high and desperate. "The death, the estate, all of it. She said we could make easy money before anyone else noticed." He swallowed hard, avoiding Amanda's glare. "I told her we needed proof. She didn't care." Outside, the crowd was growing. Neighbors leaned on fences. Folding chairs appeared out of nowhere, and the hum of whispered gossip ran through. The mountain air like static. Mrs. Henderson, the one who'd first declared me dead, was there too, her hands clasped in front of her, looking like she wished she could vanish into the gravel. Amanda's composure was gone. She looked from the sheriff to the crowd, then back to me, like she might still find a crack to slip through. But the only cracks here were the ones in her story, and they'd split wide open. When Davis finally stepped toward her, reaching for the cuffs, the murmurs outside turned into something like applause. It wasn't loud, just that low, satisfied sound a crowd makes when they've seen justice in real time. "Wait! You can't do this!" Amanda snapped, her voice rising in pitch. "I've been in real estate for 15 years. I have clients." "You had clients," Davis corrected. "Now you have charges." The metal of the handcuffs clicked around, her wrists sharp and final. She tried to twist away, but the sheriff held her steady. "Amanda Sterling, you are under arrest for trespassing, fraud, and conducting a real estate transaction without legal authority. We'll sort the rest of it out down at the station." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Phones were out now, recording her every step as Davis walked her to the cruiser. She kept her chin up, but it was a brittle, trembling kind of pride, the kind that cracks under the weight of 1,000 eyes. Rick stayed frozen near the doorway, staring at the floor. "Am I—" he started, then stopped, like he was afraid to finish the question. "Not today," Davis told him, glancing at me. "Depends on how helpful you're willing to be." Rick's eyes darted to Amanda, then back to the sheriff. "I'll tell you everything." His voice was small, but it was the sound of a man cutting ties with his own sinking ship. As Amanda's cruiser pulled away, the crowd outside shifted their attention to me. People I hadn't spoken to in years clapped. Me on the back, shook my hand, muttered things like, "Good on you," and "She had it coming." Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, her cheeks pink. "Tommy, I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" I held up a hand. "You didn't put her here, Mrs. Henderson. She did that herself." Still, I could see the guilt in her eyes. Gossip might have lit the first match, but Amanda was the one who'd poured the gasoline. When the last of the cruisers left and the crowd began to thin, I stood at the Welded gate, looking out at the spot where Amanda had stood just hours ago, spinning her lies. The air felt lighter now, like the mountain itself had been holding its breath and could finally exhale. But this wasn't over. Not yet. Amanda might be in custody, but the fallout, the kind of slow, grinding consequences that eat away at someone's life, was just beginning. And I was going to watch every bit of it from the comfort of the home she'd tried to steal. Amanda's arrest wasn't the end. It was the first domino. Within 24 hours, the story had spread beyond our little mountain road. Every coffee shop in the county was buzzing with it. The HOA president and top-selling realtor caught, trying to sell a dead man's home while the very alive owner watched from the basement. People didn't just talk about it, they savored it. The state real estate board moved fast. I heard through a friend that her license was temporarily suspended pending investigation, which was polite legal talk for, "You're done." No license meant no sales meant no commission, and no commission meant the money she'd been counting before it hit her bank account was gone for good. Her brokerage didn't hesitate either. One day she was on their website, smiling in a headshot with that tight, confident grin. The next day, she was erased like she'd never worked there at all. Every pending deal she'd been handling was reassigned to agents who knew the difference. Between opportunity and felony, Rick, true to his word, handed over everything: emails, call logs, texts. His statements painted the picture in sharp, undeniable detail. Amanda hadn't stumbled into a mistake. She'd built a blueprint for theft piece by piece, betting on my silence and the community's willingness to believe her version of the story. The prosecutor didn't have to work hard. With the footage I'd provided and Rick's testimony, the charges stacked like bricks: trespassing, mail theft, real estate fraud, accepting funds under false pretenses. Each one carried weight, but together they could crush a career and a reputation beyond repair. While Amanda scrambled for a defense, I was fixing my life. Her restitution payments, part of the court's conditions, covered my overdue mortgage entirely. 1 week after her arrest, I went from months behind on payments to debt-free. It was surreal. The same woman who'd tried to take my home had saved it by force of law. And the cabin, it felt different now. Not just walls and beams and the smell of pine sap in the mornings. It felt defended, safe. Mine in a way it hadn't for years. Neighbors started stopping by. Not the casual nod at a distance visits from before, but real, intentional check-ins. People brought casseroles, offered to help repair the fence line, asked if I needed anything from town. I wasn't used to it, but I could feel something shifting. Miss, Henderson even came by with a peach cobbler and a sheepish smile. "Figured I owed you more than an apology," she said. I told her the truth. Amanda's choices were her own. But I could see the relief in her eyes when she left. Gossip had set the stage, sure, but it had been greed that took the lead role. Meanwhile, Amanda's world was shrinking. She couldn't show her face in the grocery store without whispers following her down the aisles. She couldn't walk into the post office without people pretending to check their phones just to avoid meeting her eyes. In a small town, your name is your currency, and hers was worthless now. I heard she'd tried to pick up side work, anything to keep money coming, in while her legal bills piled up. But every job offer seemed to evaporate as soon as someone Googled her name and saw the headlines. The court-ordered damages didn't stop with my mortgage. She had to pay my legal fees, too, $15,000 she didn't have. Every check she wrote toward that debt was another reminder that the man she'd declared dead was not only alive, but living better than before. Rick came back once, unannounced. He stood on my porch holding a manila folder. "I know I was part of it," he said, "but I want you to know I'm done with her kind of business. If you ever do decide to sell the right way, I'll make it right." I believed him. The man had been greedy, yes, but not malicious in the way Amanda was. There's a difference between someone who gets pulled into a bad current and someone who dives headfirst into the deep end, dragging others with them. The local paper called me a whistleblower, which made me laugh. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I'd just refused to let myself be erased. But the story turned me into something I hadn't expected. The guy who beat the HOA president at her own game, and that was a title I didn't mind carrying. Amanda's trial date was set for early fall, and the talk around town was that she'd take a plea just to avoid the humiliation of a full courtroom spectacle. But honestly, part of me hoped she'd fight it, just so every detail could be read into the record for the world to hear. Either way, I knew one thing. Amanda Sterling's climb to the top of the HOA food chain had ended in a long, hard drop, and she hadn't hit bottom yet.
Amanda's fall didn't end with the arrest, the charges, or the whispers in the grocery store. Those were just the first fractures. The real break came when her own world, the one she'd built on image, reputation, and influence, started to collapse from the inside. The legal bills were bleeding her dry. She'd lost her income stream. Her brokerage had cut her loose, and the state had frozen her license while the investigation dragged on. That meant no closings, no commissions, no easy fixes. It didn't take long before the word got around. Amanda Sterling was behind on her own mortgage. I wish I could say I didn't enjoy hearing that. But the truth is, when you've watched someone circle your home like a vulture, when you've listened to them stand in your workshop and talk about gutting it like it was nothing, there's a certain satisfaction in watching them face the same ticking clock they thought would finish you. Rumor became fact when a for sale sign went up in front of her house. Not one of her signs, she didn't have the right to post those anymore, but a plain white placard from another agent in town. The woman who once ran the HOA with an iron smile now had no control over the sale of her own property. She tried to keep her chin up when she came to collect the last of her things. I happened to be at the post office that day when she walked in. You could feel the room shift. Conversations paused. Eyes followed her. She didn't look at me, but she didn't have to. The flush in her cheeks told me she felt every gaze in that building. In a small town, shame isn't loud. It's quiet, constant, and heavy. When the sale went through, it was for less than market value. She needed the cash fast, and everyone knew it. The poetic symmetry didn't escape anyone. The woman who'd tried to steal my home had lost hers. Meanwhile, my life had taken a turn I never saw coming. The restitution she was ordered to pay had cleared my mortgage and covered my legal fees. I was debt-free for the first time in years. The cabin felt like mine in a way it hadn't before. Not just because I held the deed, but because I defended it. Every board, every nail, every memory inside those walls felt earned. That's when I decided to leave a message for anyone who might think about testing me again. I welded a new sign for the front gate. Thick steel, bold letters cut clean. It read, Tommy Callahan, very much alive. Trespassers will be welded in. The first week it was up, people slowed their cars just to read it. Some even stopped to take pictures. Word spread fast. The sign wasn't just a warning, it was a landmark. One Saturday, I stepped outside to find a family parked by the gate, taking a group photo in front of it. They laughed when they saw me, said they'd heard the story and wanted to see the famous gate in person. I didn't mind. The sign wasn't about keeping people away. It was about letting them know where I stood. The funny thing was, people started treating me differently after that. Not in a hero worship kind of way, but with a quiet respect. The guy who'd once been the reclusive neighbor was now the man who'd taken on the HOA president and won. The workshop, the one Amanda had wanted to gut, became my favorite place again. I spent long hours there, not just welding for work, but for the joy of it. I even started making little steel replicas of the gate sign for people who asked. They'd buy them, hang them in their garages or shops, and joke that they were Amanda-proofing their own homes. Every time I handed one over, I remembered the look on her face the day she saw me step out of the bathroom alive. The shock, the fear, the dawning realization that her whole scheme was crumbling. And I knew, no matter how far she moved, no matter where she tried to start over, that moment would follow her. In a way, that was the real victory. Not just keeping my home, but knowing she'd never be able to tell her own story without mine hanging over it. She'd built her life on the idea that she could outsmart anyone. But in the end, she was just another con who believed her own pitch, until reality welded the gate shut behind her. Amanda's day in court didn't draw the kind of crowd her arrest had, but the whispers were just as sharp. The evidence was airtight. The videos, the recordings, the witness statements. Rick's testimony sealed it. Even her lawyer looked like he was just trying to soften the landing, not win the fight. In the end, she took a plea deal. 2 years in county jail. Restitution to the buyers she'd conned. Court-ordered payments to me for damages and legal fees. And, maybe the deepest, cut of all, a permanent mark on her record that meant she'd never work in real estate again. She didn't look at me when they read the sentence. But I saw her jaw tighten. The last remnants of pride holding her together as they led her out in cuffs. Life went quiet after that. The cabin returned to its normal rhythm. Wind through the pines, the hum of my welder, the soft creak of the porch boards under my boots. Neighbors still stopped by sometimes, but the chaos was gone. 3 weeks later, the phone rang. The call came from the county jail. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity is a powerful thing. Tommy, her voice came through, flat and tired. None of that old sharpness left. I hope you're happy. I let a beat of silence pass before I answered. Actually, Amanda, I am. My voice was steady. Thanks for reminding me why I love living alone. She didn't reply. The line went dead. That might have been the true ending, but life has a way of tacking on one last twist. A week later, a buddy of mine sent me a link. Someone had uploaded clips from my security footage, Amanda's tours, the fake bidding war, her meltdown when I appeared in my own living room. It had gone viral. Millions of views. People were calling it the dead owner plot. Then came the email, Netflix. They wanted the rights to turn it into a true crime documentary. I told them no. Not because I didn't think they'd do it justice, but because I didn't need anything else from the story. I already had what mattered: my home, my peace, and the satisfaction of knowing Amanda's name was now a cautionary tale, not a badge of authority. Looking back, I realized Amanda had done me an unintentional favor. She'd forced me to fight for the place I'd been taking for granted. She'd reminded me how much this cabin, my grandfather's workshop, the gate at the end of the drive, the quiet mornings, meant to me. And maybe the biggest lesson was this: you don't always have to go looking for revenge. Sometimes, you just have to let greedy people dig their own hole, then make sure they stay in it. The gate still stands welded, the sign still catching sunlight in bold steel letters. Tommy Callahan, very much alive. Trespassers will be welded in. It's not just a warning, it's a story. And around here, everyone knows how it ends.